Friendship. A friend is someone who knows all about you and still loves you. Elbert Hubbard. In true friendship, no words are needed. Sometimes merely sitting together is enough, each one doing what he likes, reading or contemplating. Friendship is understanding. Friendship is acceptance. Friendship is a state of non-judgment, of empathy and sympathy, humor, kindness, and sometimes scolding. Frugality. There is no dignity quite so impressive, and no independence quite so important, as living within your means. Calvin Coolidge. This is one of the many quotes extolling the virtue of frugality. Unlike avarice or stinginess, frugality means judicious use of what one has at one's disposal. This is not being a miser, but rather taking care and prudence that distinguishes the frugal attitude. If you have $10 of disposable funds, and you choose to spend $8 and save the rest, you are being frugal. If you choose to keep all $10 and additionally deprive your family of its needs, you are being avaricious. Ebenezer Scrooge of Dickens fame was a miser. He deprived himself, his family, and his community of needs. But worse, his demeanor was mean, sour, and bitter. Even his countenance was miserly. Frugality, on the other hand, is akin to prudence and forbearance, the quality of being patient and wise. Generosity. You give but little when you give of your possessions. It is when you give of yourself that you truly give. Khalil Gibran. There is a legend that tells the story of an old woman who was accepted into heaven with all the fanfare of a true believer. However, she had lived a life of sin and crime, debauchery and malfeasance. Upon entering heaven, the other residents were in an uproar, but were soon subdued when they learned the reason for her exalted status. On her last day among the living, she gave her last possession, an onion, to a stranger. The story is amply told in various parts of the Bible, as allegorical for the virtue that is generosity. Of all who have had given of their wealth, the one who stood out was the poor widow who had given of her meager possessions. Generosity is so much more complex and laudable when one refrains from claiming credit, or rejoices in the victory of others, lends assistance even though he is overwhelmed by work, or shares his knowledge and expertise without hoping for compensation. Gentleness. Oh, that gentleness! How far more potent it is than force! Charlotte Bronte. Treat everyone with a gentle hand, a soft voice, and a tender manner. The receiver will get pleasure, you will gain strength. Grace. Christ went more willingly to the cross than we do to the throne of grace. Thomas Watson. Grace is accepting the difficult in the face of fear. Grace is dignity and mastery of one's soul. It is grace that impels us to gratitude even when the object of that thanks is not deserving. To find beauty in a cloudy day, or contentment in a hovel, is to know the grace and vastness of generosity and gentleness. Graciousness. If you happen to be born on third base, you didn't rub it in the face of the guy who wasn't even born in the stadium. Self-interest was generally checked at the door with your coat and hat. Ron Susskind. Dare to rejoice for the glory of your enemy. Be happy for the other person. Refrain from pointing out mistakes, and do not boast about your own good fortune. Be humble. There is always something to be learned. Gratitude. Some people grumble that roses have thorns. I am grateful that thorns have roses. Alphonse Karr. I had a conversation with my son in which I asked him if he was happy. Without hesitation he answered, "I'm extremely happy. I am free to do what I want, when I want. My life is just good." I pondered that answer and felt some envy at his sense of freedom. I, by contrast, do not feel free. I feel weighed down by stuff, responsibilities, my job, and limited finances. So I put that question to a couple of friends. What is happiness and what is freedom? The answers came rapidly and authentically. Happiness is the state of accepting what one has with gratitude. Freedom is a bit trickier. Gratitude for the roses as well as their thorns? How profound! The difficulties in life are as precious as successes and rewards. Without difficulties and strife, how would we test our mettle? Where would we exercise judgment? How would we make choices? I have, indeed, many things to be grateful for. Once I begin to focus on what I am grateful for, from the most minuscule to the grand, I indeed feel happy, blessed, lucky, and proud of myself. Grit. The vocational approach at New Orleans Center for the Creative Arts helps build grit in students. It teaches them how to be single-minded in pursuit of a goal, to sacrifice for the sake of a passion. The teachers demand hard work from their kids because they know, from personal experience, that creative success requires nothing less. Jonah Lehrer. Grit encompasses perseverance and strength to pursue a passion and achieve a goal, not letting anything distract or detract you from that attainment. It is a personality trait, according to psychologists, a single-mindedness, and courage to overcome obstacles and challenges as they present themselves. Some psychologists have also included conscientiousness as a requirement, but grit turns out to be a distinct trait in that it is more closely related to perseverance and uncompromising determination. If your goal is worthy, only grit will do in its achievement. Happiness. True happiness is to enjoy the present, without anxious dependence on the future, not to amuse ourselves with either hopes or fears, but to rest satisfied with what we have, which is sufficient, for he that is so wants nothing. The greatest blessings of mankind are within us and within our reach. A wise man is content with his lot, whatever it may be, without wishing for what he has not. Seneca. Happiness takes many forms, yet rarely do these forms include a state of giddiness or silly irresponsibility. Some notable philosophers have advanced the idea that happiness is the very purpose of life. From Aristotle to the Dalai Lama, from Buddha to Thomas Aquinas, the Evdaimonia and even our own Declaration of Independence promote happiness as not only a right, but also an obligation, a need, if you will. Abraham Maslow, the great American psychologist, has developed the hierarchy of needs, placing self-actualization at the top of the pyramid. If happiness is not hedonism, what is it exactly? Some concepts applicable to happiness include well-being and quality of life. Some thinkers make the important distinction between the hedonistic or feel-good version of happiness and the eudaimonic concept of living life well. Freud viewed happiness as a variant of hedonism, or more to the point, the preference to seek out pleasurable experiences and avoid unpleasant ones. The problem with defining happiness is that it is such an amorphous term, an experience that cannot be studied, cannot be easily operationalized in a laboratory. We therefore depend a great deal on subjective reports, but dig a little deeper, and the experience of happiness is revealed. Martin Seligman has asserted, as have others, that happiness does not derive merely from external, temporary pleasures. He advanced the acronym PERMA, P-E-R-M-A, to describe the essential components that can be seen in people who are said to be happy. P. Pleasure, good food, sleep, warm environment. E. Engagement or flow, as in finding something absorbing, either a great book or a pastime, that is so engrossing as to make one lose the sense of time. R. Relationships that are healthy and supportive. M. Meaning, or the sense that one's life matters. A. Accomplishment or the attainment of goals. The casual observer might settle on the first item in the list, pleasure, and conclude that it's the most important, the most compelling of the five, and perhaps even inadvertently tipping the hat to hedonism, as in the "if it feels good, do it" mantra of the 70s and 80s. That reader would be incorrect. It seems that hedonism does not figure in the fuzzy concept of happiness. Much deeper and more meaningful are the other elements of PERMA, such as engagement, focus on a large, important project that absorbs one's cognition, and a sense that one's life has a purpose, a reason to get up in the morning, so to speak. Why have some philosophers claimed that human beings need happiness, and have described it as an activity rather than as an emotion? The Chinese thinker Mencius claimed that happiness should move from one's lesser self, the physiological, to one's higher self, the moral self, by obtaining pleasure from nourishing our vital force with righteous deeds. The Hindu philosopher Patanjali wrote extensively about the psychological and ontological basis of bliss. According to Aristotle, happiness was the only thing human beings desired for its own sake. Eudaimonia is translated as an activity rather than emotional state. It is by doing good and living the good life that one is happy. According to him, the good life represents a life of reason and rational activity, since human beings are uniquely capable of reason. And for those people incapable of solid reasoning, the second best form of happiness is a life of virtue. If this begins to smack of religiosity, it is not. So, what is a life of virtue? As already described, Aristotle's Eudaimonia suggests that happiness is the result of a life well lived, as an active, deliberate display of the good in human nature. According to Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, happiness is not an emotion, but rather is the result of using one's cognition for good behavior. Some ethicists have discussed how humans should behave, individually or as in groups, for happiness to manifest as a result of their behavior. Utilitarians like John Stuart Mill and Jeremy Bentham advocate the greatest happiness principle as a guide to personal ethical behavior. The use of one's cognition or reasoning capacity espoused by Aristotle and others, St. Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, was for the assessment of the consequences of behavior as indicative of one's level of happiness. Living a good life that would naturally lead to happiness involved developing a set of habits based on virtue and ethics. Several measures of happiness have been developed over the years by different psychological studies, from subjective assessments of well-being to the Satisfaction with Life Scale, SWLS. Physical health has been attributed to happiness. It seems that most of these studies converge on satisfaction as a critical component of happiness, but there are others. How does one define satisfaction or the accomplishment of goals? Success measured not by accumulation of riches, but rather as overcoming a difficulty or a challenge? What about facing a fear head-on, confronting one's demons? Not cringing from embarrassment or seeking what is difficult for its own sake. These are examples of some transient, fleeting moments that convey a measure of pride and self-esteem, but are not lifelong experiences. Indeed, according to these philosophies, happiness is an ongoing journey, an active journey, not as a goal to be reached as the attainment of a lifelong state of bliss. So, what is it about living the so-called good life that makes for a state of happiness? It seems that the best behavior, most concerned with helping, doing one's best, putting in one's best efforts, and refraining from inflicting any kind of pain or distress on another, promotes a set of cleanness of mind and soul. There is little anxiety to pull one's mind in the direction of regret or fear of dire consequences. Do the best you can, and do not worry about the outcome. In terms of accomplishments of a difficult goal, self-esteem promotes that elusive sense of happiness. The more one practices that particular muscle, continually pushing that proverbial boulder up the mountain, Sisyphus, with resolve and dedication rather than as punishment or a chore, the deeper will be one's continued sense of happiness and self-worth. Living the good life is a personal choice buffered by reason and wisdom. To promote a sense of happiness, one should engage one's intelligence to temper personal urges and desires with the greater good. All life is choice. Not all choices lead to happiness. The road not taken. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I marked the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Robert Frost. Helpfulness. Every life is meant to help all lives. Each man should live for all men's betterment. Alice Carey. Have you heard that moving one's little finger moves the entire universe? This is not the song of self-improvement seminarians, but in fact can be proved through physics. When a finger moves, or one draws breath, the air molecules around displace and settle into new configurations. They are invisible to the naked eye, of course, and in the rush of life we are naturally blind to such minute alterations in our environment. Moreover, our environment consists of so many aspects that it is impossible to be aware of it all. But lack of conscious awareness does not deny reality. It is axiomatic that we are all interrelated. As one passes on and is buried, he becomes fodder for the next generation, the next crop, fertilizer, and nourishment to whatever follows. As the ocean evaporates and becomes rain, so the rain seeps into the ground and is held as moisture to imbue the universe, and get once again absorbed or evaporated into different forms. We cannot help but help each other. Whether voluntarily or not, we are each other's aids. Whether we consciously choose to work for the betterment of others is irrelevant to the fact that we live for and with each other. As we provide support and solace, so others sustain and strengthen us.